Well folks, it's Saturday the 1st of October 2016 and sadly that's the end of the tomato season in my greenhouse at home. I've just been round and I've taken off the last few cherries and quite a few beefsteak, probably about 20 beefsteak, and they're a decent size and they've ripened up okay. Some black pineapples, getting on for £1 each those. A mixture of porterhouse and country taste, Paul Robeson's, that might be a Cherokee purple. It's always sad when it happens, but it's been a really good yielding season really for tomatoes. Not the sweetest season. It started off cool and it's ended cool as well, but the beefsteaks have really thrived, and I have to say I'm happy really. It's been successful all round. So that's the end of the tomato growing season. Still a few left on the allotment. I've just got that thankless task of cutting out the tomato plants themselves now from the greenhouse. So cheers everybody. Hi folks, just thought I'd mention that 2 weeks ago the tomatoes really bore fruit, and they won me a little trophy. I attended the Saltaire Festival weekend and submitted some of my beefsteaks into the West Yorkshire Organic Group's annual fruit and veg show. I went primarily to meet Terry Marshall, the guy that's written a couple of really good tomato books. I thought I'd just pick his brains. I had no intentions of submitting anything into the show, but then I thought, well, what the hell, I've got lots of beefsteaks, so I popped down to the allotment at the start of the day, picked a handful of beefsteaks and put them in. No great expectations or hopes. As I say, I've never entered anything before. Submitted the tomatoes, left the show, had a walk around the town, looked at all the events that they'd got on over that weekend, came back, and the tomatoes were judged on taste, because it's an organic exhibition show, not judged on uniformity or anything like that. So the judges tasted the tomatoes, and the main judge was Terry Marshall, and then all the exhibitors got to taste, your exhibits as well, and other visitors. And then they rang a bell, put my head round the corner, and I noticed I'd got a couple of tickets on my tomatoes. And in fact, I'd got, out of the three categories, beefsteak, cherry and standard tomato, I got pretty much all the prizes. First, second, third, highly commended, and best exhibit in show. And I went to meet Terry Marshall, and I ended up being presented with a trophy for the best tomato exhibit for Brandy Boy, awarded by the man himself. So quite proud about that. I did video the day, but afterwards I just thought it'd be a bit self-indulgent to bore you with that. I've got to go back next year to return the trophy, and I'll see how I get on. See how I get on then. So that's it for tomatoes, probably for this year. I'm going to devote the rest of this update to beans and their preservation. I hope you enjoy that. So I'll catch you later. Hi again. Sunday the 2nd of October. I'm down on the allotment, on the first allotment actually. Sun's really nice and bright this morning, rained overnight. As you can see, a few things have been finished with now. The peas there, the tall peas, they're all finished. Leaving them a little while longer, and then we'll take the tops off, leave the roots in the ground, because as you know they fix the nitrogen from the air and hopefully enrich the soil for next year. the potato bed now. That's well and truly been dug, and all the potatoes have been taken. Looks like they've seen a trench warfare. Got to level that out today, but they've all been taken out. The Charlotte, Nicola, and that second tranche of Pentland Javelin, we had 5 rows of those. Some we've eaten, but we've just taken 4 rows up. They've been dried out and bagged up. I've actually still got about a sack's worth drying out. We also took the last couple of rows of Charlotte from the other allotment as well. Took those up yesterday, and we've ended up, my cousin and I, with 5 sacks of potatoes each. 1 sack of Charlotte, they're a second early, and a sack of Pentland Javelin, they're a first early, but they were left in the ground, so they're really only good for roast and mash now. But the Charlotte, they're still good as new potatoes, because there were some smallish ones in there. And then 3 sacks of main crop keepers, Picasso and King Edwards. So with about, I would say comfortably, about 250 pounds worth of potatoes each to take us through the autumn and winter, hopefully, if they don't rot, until Easter. Sprouts are growing on there, they're great. We had 2 varieties there. One was an earlier variety. We've got 3 rows of each. We've just started to take some of the sprouts off the first 3 rows. Parsnips, well, we had 6 rows and they all came really, really well. We've started at this end taking them out, and we've taken nearly a row out already. And I think they're the white gem. And the reason we've taken a row out is some of them were forked. We did do a tester off each row, and the others, the Gladiator and Albion varieties, they were really, really good, really long, slender roots, no damage at all. But the white gem at this side, as I say, they don't seem to have coped quite as well with the soil, maybe a little bit stony. And we've got some turnips there. They were put in late, and we're just in the process of thinning those out. Took some out yesterday. But my job for this morning is here. This is the first bean frame, and as you can see, all the beans that were too big were left, and 95% of them have dried out now. So I'm going to take those off, and then when I get a spare hour, I'm going to sit there with a flask of tea or coffee, and I'm going to pod those beans, and they're going to go back into the bean tin for next year, because they're a really, really good bean. I don't know what the variety is. As I mentioned earlier in the season, I inherited some beans from a friend in Germany, a retired farmer, and I've been growing them now for the last 5 years. And I'll show you the beans on the second bean frame, and you can see what they look like. They're a really nice bean, and even when they're allowed to grow on a little bit longer, they're still really, really delicate in taste and sweet and soft and juicy, not stringy at all. Really nice. So I better get on with this, and then I'll be home for lunch, and then back down again this afternoon, because I need to level out that soil where I've taken the potatoes up. I've got another bed as well on the 4th allotment, and that looks just the same. I've got to level that as well. So I'll catch you later, and I'll just get back to my dried bean pulling. See you later. Just back to take a quick look at the bean frame now I've stripped it. That's it done. That was the first bean frame, planted in the middle of May. The beans, if you remember, were started in modules, and there were about 32 modules with 2 beans in each. Made it easier to pull the beans out of the modules once the roots had established themselves. And as the beans got too big, we stopped picking them to eat them, and we left them on. When you could see the shape of the bean in the pod, that's normally when you leave them. And from this tiny little bean frame, which is about 5'6" high and 8 or 9 foot long, we probably took about 10, I would think quite easily 10 kilo of beans off. And I've just filled a carrier bag full of dried beans. Most of them are green, and I don't know what that variety is, and there'll be maybe 20% of the blue bean, and that's the Blauhilde climbing bean, if I remember correctly. So they're pretty much dry. Some of the pods are still a little bit soft, so I'll put them in the barn and I'll put them on the bench to dry a little bit more, and then as I say, I'll pod them up and we'll have plenty of beans for next year. And it might look like overkill there with a full carrier bag full, but we've currently got 2 bean frames. One I've made and one is a recycled section of site fencing. But it would be nice to get another frame, maybe on the new allotment, because I've still not really done anything to that. So the more the merrier, and we won't be short of beans, that's for certain. And they won't have cost a penny either, because when we plant the beans we put them into the soil, and the soil's trenched first, and we put vegetable peelings, a bit of manure, but nothing that's bought, nothing that's paid for. So there you go, from one year to the next, completely free beans. And this year we'll probably have taken about 20-25 kilos of beans off, just off 2 climbing frames, if you want to call them that. So can't go wrong really. And I've still got beans growing on the second frame, and the next time I come to preserve any, I'll show you how I do that as well. Okay, catch you later. Hi again. It's still Sunday the 2nd of October. It's the evening now, about 6 o'clock, and about an hour and a half ago, I picked some beans. You can see I've got 2 recycled bread bags full of beans, and I've started topping and tailing the beans. This is the laborious bit, but it has to be done. You know, we take the time taking the beans off at the end of the season, just like I have done today. We pod the beans, we keep them, we store them over winter, then we sow them in modules, we put them in the ground, we prepare the ground, and then they grow. And if we're lucky, from about the middle of July, we start getting beans. But by the time we reach early October, mid-October at the latest, the fresh beans have gone. So what I'm trying to do is be self-sufficient 52 weeks of the year with beans, and I've already preserved 25 jars of beans, and the jars are between about 1 litre and 1.5 litres in size, and that's enough for 1 meal for 4 people, or probably two meals for 3 people. I've set up the water bath, the electric water bath. I've just got to finish topping and tailing the beans, and then I'll show you what happens next. Okay, catch you in a minute. And this is what the finished jar of beans looks like when it's preserved. As you can see, there's the glass jar, there's a glass lid, and there's a rubber gasket that separates the two. Now when the jar is in the water bath, the lid is held on with 3 of these clips here, and they're just put on temporarily during the time that it's in the water bath, and then until such time as the contents of the jar have cooled, then you can take them off. And what happens is, when the jar is in the water bath, obviously it reaches temperature and it cooks. It's actually to 100 degrees, and for longer than you might imagine, for 2 hours. And steam exits the jar through the seal between the lid and the jar and the rubber gasket, because it's not airtight at that stage. It's clipped, but the pressure is enough just to lift it a little bit to expel air and steam from within the jar. When it's finished cooking, the pressure inside the jar is less than the atmospheric pressure surrounding it, and that basically means that the lid will then stay on without any fastenings at all. It's purely atmospheric pressure that's keeping that lid on. It's quite a thin lid, as you can see, but it's vacuum sealed. And some people have concerns about beans and other items such as potatoes being preserved in this way, but the key really is to observe and adhere to the rules for preserving them. So basically you have to have them at the right temperature and for the right length of time, and then you're perfectly alright, perfectly safe. And these beans will keep for years. I started eating these in October last year and I finished in March, and I'm hoping that they'll last right through to the summer again next year. So they're the components: jar, lid, rubber gasket, clips. This is the water bath. Once you've got your beans in your jar with water, you pop them inside and then you fill the bath up to 3/4 of the depth of the jar. You put your lid on, set your thermostat, and then you just time it, and in this instance it's 2 hours. With other things it's much less. If you were doing onions it'd be much less, and there's a schedule that shows you how long and for what vegetable or fruit. But because it's thermostatically controlled, it's not as power hungry as you might first think. So 2 hours sounds like a long time, but it's just kept at that temperature. Clicks in, clicks off, but maintains that temperature. So it's, as I say, it's not as expensive as you might think. And what you've got to do is take a longer term view, and you're not going to be having a chest freezer or the freezer part of the fridge rammed full with frozen beans and other things. So you're saving power that way. So this is a much more efficient way to do it. And you would think that after 2 hours the beans would be cooked to death. But trust me, when you open those beans in a year's time and eat them, they taste like they've just been cooked, and cooked for about 4 or 5 minutes. They taste really fantastic. So the beans have just been washed. I'm going to put them into the jars. Then I'll fill them with water. You fill them to within about 2 centimetres of the top. You don't need to sterilise the jars because they're going to be in the water bath at 100 degrees for 2 hours. So it's not really necessary. It's only if you're doing something at a lower temperature, say 80 or 90 degrees for about 20 minutes, that you have to pre-sterilise your jars. So it's quite straightforward. All I've done is I've washed the jars out in soapy water, rinsed them off, topped and tailed the beans, washed the beans will go in the jars. They'll be filled to within 2 centimetres of the top. The lids, or rather the rubber gaskets, will go on, then the lid, then the fasteners. They'll go into the water bath, which will be filled to 3/4 of the depth of the jars, and time will be set. Thermostat will be on. 2 hours later they'll be done and dusted. You allow them to cool, and then you can take your fasteners off, and they're in the garage then for a year or however long you want to keep them. What I will say is the gaskets do have to be just heated through, sort of boiled for about 30 seconds a minute, and you put a bit of vinegar in. I've put a bit of white vinegar in with the water as well, and that sterilises the rubber seals, but it also softens them as well. So that's the procedure. I'll fill the jars and then I'll show you as I put them into the water bath. So there I've got my 5 jars packed ram full with beans. What I didn't mention earlier was that it's entirely up to you whether you salt them at this stage. Some people don't salt them, and they salt them when they warm them up to eat at a later stage. I put about half a level teaspoon in these jars, and these jars are 850 millilitre jars, not quite a litre. So you don't want to overdo it, but I just put a little bit in, and then when it comes to actually eating the beans, when you know, in 6 months' time, say, all I do is I boil some water, bring it to boiling point, empty the beans out of the jar. It's a cinch. There's no work, no preparation. It's all already being done. Drain the beans, pop them in, and I just eat them for about a minute and a half, and that's it, done. So whilst this part of the preserving procedure might seem a bit labour intensive. It'll have taken me about 3/4 of an hour just to top and tail, wash the glasses out, get everything ready. I'm just pre-boiling the rubber gaskets with a bit of vinegar. So 3/4 of an hour, but when you're tired and you're coming from work in 6 months' time, and you can just drain and cook your beans, and they're there and they're ready in a minute and a half, believe me, it's quite something. It's a great sense of relief that you get when you know you haven't got to prepare some veg, and you've got veg on tap. So it makes all the effort worthwhile at this stage. You know you're doing a good thing by doing this. You're not wasting anything. Okay, it's great to give, you know, surplus things away, beans, potatoes, whatever else, but it's nice to be able to make the most of what you've grown as well, and that's what we're aiming to do here. So I've got half a level teaspoon of salt in each jar, filled them with water to about 2 centimetres from the top. These rubber gaskets are about ready now, so I'll turn them off, just let them cool a little bit, and then we'll get them fastened up and in the water bath. And that's all the beans fastened up nicely now. You can see jar, lid, rubber gasket in between, and 3 clips. The clips stay on, as I say, until after cooking. You always have to be very careful to make sure that the rubber gasket is not twisted and that it sits flush and that the clips are on properly. As I say, it's not an airtight seal at this stage. That allows steam to come out and create a vacuum. Once it's cooked, you can take the clips off, and it's airtight, it's sealed, because there's a vacuum inside. If there were to be anything inside there, any impurities, any growths of any kind, they would generate and produce gas, and that gas would equalise over time the pressure inside the jar with the atmospheric pressure around the jar. So when you came to get your beans or anything else, onions, jam, whatever else it is that you want to use and consume, if the lid was loose, you'd know that it wouldn't be safe to eat, because there would have been gases in there that would have equalised the pressure and caused a failure of the vacuum seal. So it's pretty foolproof, really. So we'll put this now with the other jars into the water bath. You have to make sure that there's a little bit of a gap around each one, as you can see. And the key thing now is you don't put too much water in, because you want it below the level of the water in the jar, so you fill it to about 3/4 of the depth of the jars. But you also don't start your cooking time, your 2 hours, until the thermostat clicks off and you know it's reached temperature. You can't just put the jars into water that's already boiling or at the prescribed temperature, because there'll be a time delay. It might take 20-30 minutes for the contents of the jars to reach the same temperature as the surrounding water in the bath. And then clearly, if that's the case, then you're not getting 2 hours, you're only getting an hour and a half of cooking time, so it won't kill any bacteria that might be, you know, on the beans or anything else that you're trying to preserve. So you bring it all to temperature, and then when the thermostat clicks off, you give it the prescribed amount of time, and it's 2 hours in this instance. So I'm going to fill up now, and then we'll turn it on. Right, so I've filled up the water bath to 3/4 of the depth of the jars, and I've checked that it is at that depth, and it is. Turn it on at the socket now. Turn the thermometer to 100 degrees. You can see it's a Weck Automatic Einkochtopf. It's a German setup, introduced around about 1900, and most families in Germany use this. Lots of people over there have little garden plots and grow lots of their own veg, certainly in the countryside anyway. So we're on 100 degrees, thermostatic lights come on. When that goes off, then it's 2 hours. So there they are. We'll tuck them away now, safe and sound. Lid on. And there we go. That's the Weck water bath system. If you're wondering what it cost about €70. You can get them with timers on, but I just use the one on the oven behind me. But €70, about £60. So really not that expensive. It's the jars that are quite expensive. You get 6 for about £12 or something like that. But they come in varying sizes as well. You can do them for small amounts of preserves. You know, you can have big jars, litre and a half, a quarter of a litre. They use the jars actually, some of the smaller ones in trendy restaurants, you know, for sorbets and things like that. I'm lucky in that I know a German family, and they've given me lots of old, really ancient jars, which are still good, even though they're 50-year-old. Slightly different shaped jar and locking system, but they work perfectly well. So it might seem like a bit of an investment to start with if you have to part with, I don't know, say £50 or £60 on jars, and the same on the water bath. £120. You might spend another £10 on, I don't know, these little things like the tongs to take the hot jars out of the water bath. But the gaskets and the seals, they come with the jars when you get them, and you can reuse the seals, but they're easy, they're cheap as well. They're about £1 for a pack of 10. So in the long run, it's a very, very, very good investment, I think. So that's it for the way that I preserve beans, and you can use it for just about everything. Fruit, vegetables. The Germans do it for meat as well, but you have to make sure the meat's well cooked in advance. So that's me done with the beans tonight. I just need to sit down now, read a book, or I'm forgetting, I've got to make some tomato soup with some elephant garlic. So that's my next job. Alright, I'll catch you later.